Hi, everyone. Good afternoon and welcome to the Author Journey. I'm Anne O'Connell with OC Publishing, and today's show is chock-a-block full of amazing bookish stuff. And that's because this week is Atlantic Book Festival. We're actually right smack dab in the middle of it. It's running from May 28th to June 4th. Well, actually, tomorrow, June 5th, which is going to be the culmination of the gala. But last night we had the Nova Scotia Book Awards, and today I'm so excited that we'll have with us one of the authors that was a double nominee and double winner. And I also have Jon Tattrie, who's the editor of Atlantic Books Today, and Sue Slade, the manager at Dartmouth Book Exchange, who will join me to talk about all things books and all the nominees and the amazing books and the events that are surrounding this Atlantic Book Festival. So I'm going to bring first the double award winner from last night, Karen Pinchin. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And this baby won 2 awards, Kings of Their Own Ocean, Tuna Obsession, and Future of Our Seas. And I'll bring Karen up to tell you a little bit more about that. Hi, Karen.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to have you, and congratulations. It was such a wonderful event last night, and all the events that have been happening through this week. But how does it feel? My goodness, debut novel, like excitement abounds, right?
Yeah, little overwhelming, I feel like I was prepared up here, but I wasn't prepared in here, kind of, for what it would feel like to be in a group, such a talented group, such incredible projects, that I was rooting for all of them, kind of, because I didn't realize that because this is my first book, that you have all these events and you do readings with people, and I had Heather Fagan and Heather Fagan. She and I have done a couple of events together, and it's like you find yourself rooting for your co-nominees, and so it's a complex kind of tapestry of emotions that's going on.
Oh, I can only imagine. And I think you're the second, so you won the Evelyn Richardson Nonfiction Award, as well as the Margaret and John Savage First Book Award for Nonfiction, right? And I
Yeah.
think when you were accepting the award for the Margaret and John Savage Award for Nonfiction, you were like, I was rooting for Heather.
I know. And even I was rooting for Heather, and in the other case I wrote one speech on a sheet of paper. I couldn't find a little notebook, so my son got a sheet of paper and just drew lines on it. So I wrote my speech on that, which was really lovely. But I kind of gave my whole first speech, and then when I won the second award, I didn't really have anything to say, and I was kind of just overcome by emotion, because I think I honestly did expect Kelly Thompson to win for her incredible book, Still I Cannot Save You. She teaches in the MFA program with me at King's now, for the book writing program, and it's just the most beautiful, lyrical, sensitive portrait of domestic abuse and cancer, and it's just so beautifully rendered. And I don't think I realized until that moment that I got up to the mic that I think I expected her to win. So it meant a lot to, yeah, it felt really beautiful.
Well, and you know what? I did pick up a copy last night, and you had folded down a few pages for me. Thank you so much to guide me to some of your favorite parts. But talk a little bit about, just briefly, why was this an important book to write, and what's the basic premise behind it?
Yeah, so the basic premise is that it's the entwined biographies of one fisherman who grew up in New Jersey in kind of Depression era New Jersey, and then moved to Long Island, and he became obsessed with catching fish and fish tagging. And so it intertwines his story with the story of one particular bluefin tuna that he catches and tags in 2004. And so I follow his life and the life of this fish. And the reason the fish is so important is
Amelia,
because
I love that.
Amelia, my fish,
Amelia.
because there are multiple tagging instances until she eventually dies in 2018. And so I kind of use them as my narrative thread to go through a lot of bigger, complex ideas around globalization and the commodification of fish and food systems reporting and stuff that's like a little bit more abstract. But for me, ultimately, it was, I became obsessed with Al soon after my dad passed away. I kind of took all of those emotions and feelings and things and put them into the book, right? And in a way that you don't even necessarily understand what's happening as it's happening, like the writing process is so complex that things can be happening in your hind brain that you're always not necessarily aware of on the page.
And I want to point out, and I've just pulled up your bio here. I want to point out that you have quite an extensive background in journalism, and focusing predominantly on the marine industry, correct? And marine biology. So you obviously were the right person to write this. But what I also want people to know is that it's written with with a real gripping narrative. So that first section that you had folded down for me talked about the fishing trip in Westport, and just some of the language that you use, and the interaction between the characters. It just really makes for a great read. But also, for anglers and for conservationists and environmentalists, I mean, do you think that you accomplished what you set out to accomplish with this?
Kind of, and more. I had so much support along the way. The Sloan Foundation supported me for a fact checker. I had a Canada Council grant. It was my first time kind of navigating those systems. But I really adore Ernest Hemingway, Rachel Carson, arguably like the founder of modern creative nonfiction about the ocean. And then we kind of have this period where it's all just like white dudes writing about power and fish. And I think there was a social justice component. I really tried to include a lot of women's stories in this book. I think, and then there's just the element of like respecting the primary producers of these fish, not having it be this like black and white thing. And I found putting myself into the narrative, in the first draft of this book, I was not in it at all. And my editors and some of my beta readers were like, it doesn't quite get there. And I ended up with my writing group sitting down, writing what became the prologue. And it turned out, having myself in there, explaining a little bit about my dad and what brought me to this story is kind of what unlocked it for a lot of readers. And what's amazing is I've had a chance to go to some book clubs full of people who don't even eat fish, people who've never been on a boat, never held a fishing rod, none of it. And then they say, oh, I was just so entranced. I never thought I would like a book about a fish. And that it's tricky because, marketing wise, it was something some publishers who turned down early versions of the project said, like, we just don't think people will buy a book about a fish. And to my credit,
have they not read The Old Man and the Sea?
Well, but like maybe if I were a dude, they would it would unlock for them more easily, right? Like, but my editor Knopf saw the vision. Pamela Murray and Dutton down in the States got involved, and it was like all of a sudden it was like, if you get that I'm trying to tell this like really huge story through these extremely narrow stories. That it can kind of all cohere, and then you finish the book and you're like, well, I'm crying. I've heard from a lot of people that they finish the book and like sobbing. So I'm sorry in advance when you get to the final page.
Well, thank you for that warning. And let's bring up our other guests here, and we can talk about some of the other nominees. Hi, Jon. Hi, Sue. Hello. Thanks for being with us. So I know that now you're like ready to run out the door and get Karen's book, but as she said, like there were so many amazing nominees. So I thought we would jump in and also congratulate the winners from last night. In addition to Karen, And I'm going to bring up the list so I don't miss anybody. Here we go. Okay. And then we can jump in and just have a conversation about these amazing books. So the Dartmouth Book Award for fiction was chosen last night, and the winner was Amanda Peters. And I do have quite a collection with me of these. I was saying I was rushing to finish it last night before the event, and we can talk a little bit more about that. The other nominees were Charlene Carr, Hold My Girl, HarperCollins, and What Comes Echoing Back, Leo McKay Jr. from Vagrant Press. The Evelyn Richardson Nonfiction Award, as we said, Karen won that category, and the other nominees were Sherry Aikenhead, Mummy Don't with Nimbus Publishing, Still I Cannot Have You, a memoir of sisterhood, love, and letting go, McClellan and Stewart. The author is Kelly Thompson. The George Borden Writing for Change Award, the nonfiction, Jen Powley, and I want Jon to talk a little bit about this one. I think that one was on one of your lists. I don't think there was a dry eye in the house when her friend accepted the award on her behalf. Jen Powley, Making a Home, Assisted Living in the Community for Young Disabled People, Roseway Publishing. Yeah, that was heart-wrenching. But very, very, so well deserved, posthumously. The Margaret and John Savage First Book Award Fiction. I was very happy for Michelle Womble, Birth Road. And of course, some of these authors have also been interviewed on the author journey. So, people can have a look at those interviews at another time. And the two other nominees for that category were Amanda Peters, The Berry Pickers, HarperCollins, and Shelley Thompson for Roar, Nimbus Publishing. And the Margaret and John Savage First Book Award, nonfiction, About Canada, The Dental Care, Brandon Doucette, Heather Fagan, Gutsy, Living My Best Life, and Heather was also a double nominee last night. And Karen, of course, for Kings of Their Own Ocean. And some of these authors will talk also about the Atlantic Book Awards that are happening tomorrow night. So there's some of these authors have been nominated for those awards as well. So, gosh, where do you want to start here? The Atlantic Book Awards are happening tomorrow night. So maybe, Jon, do you want to
how about I jump in on how about I talk about Jen and Heather for a minute?
Yes.
I'm going to say for the George Borden one. So Heather, she can, as you say, Gutsy is a great book. It's kind of a memoir plus a coming of age story with Crohn's disease, I would say. So in that sense, I found it like an interesting read just as a general person about the same age as Heather. I work with Heather at the APMA. But also to learn more about the Crohn's disease and what the impact it has on people. It's one of those things you just hear people have it and you're like, oh, okay, I've got a headache. Yeah. But now reading that book, you understand just what people are dealing with. So that was a great book, but she writes it in such a peppy, enthusiastic, light way. You are enjoying it, kind of cheering her on.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the other one, so Jen Powley. So we had an article last year, which was really cool. So this is not Jen Powley, this is Angela Parker Brown, and two of the books in this article were written with eye technology, including Jen's book.
Right.
So both of them use this, literally writing with their eyes. And Jen's book, like you had asked a question about the importance of awards, and I think like obviously for someone like Karen to give a real platform to your books and to really help you launch your career, it's a crucial role, but also for someone like Jen when the writer's no longer here. And that book, she had a book out earlier, Just Jen, which is more a biography or a memoir rather about her life. And this one that she was nominated for, Making a Home, Assisted Living in the Community, it's really like a blueprint for how to change the government. Like it's not the kind of book you read to learn about someone or to be swept away, but to change the government and have them stop putting people like you in old folks' homes to kind of just farm you out, which is what was happening with Jen. You see the blueprints like a real call to action. And the way she wrote it with the eye technology and with the help of her partner, who I think was at the awards last night. And now, her voice is loud and clear. And the same with Angela Parker Brown's book. It's Writing with My Eyes. It's just their voice lives on. So readers it's like they are reborn to us, even if we lose them in life.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really great point, John, about how important these awards are for visibility, and to encourage people to keep writing, right? Because, it can be, a bit thankless, but just to have that recognition from your peers and from the industry, I think is really, really an amazing opportunity. So speaking of these opportunities, there are a lot of events going on that have happened and are going to happen. Sue, do you want to touch on some of what's happening during Atlantic Book Festival?
Okay, so Atlantic Book Festival it's all about promoting and acknowledging excellence in writing and publishing in Atlantic Canada. And we are, lucky to be living in Atlantic Canada because we know how to party. We know how to celebrate our authors, and other provinces just don't do it. I just looked up the provinces and I asked other authors, and they don't do this kind of stuff. But anyway, so we started last Tuesday at the Halifax Public Library, and all the nominees, or not nominees, but the people shortlisted for the awards were there, and you can actually borrow them for a one-on-one conversation.
I love that.
Yeah, and I just thought that was remarkable, and it's part of the human library movement, and it actually started Denmark, don't quote me on that, like in 2002. And
so was that this year was the first time to borrow an author?
But it's the first time I was aware of it, and I thought it was just the cat's meow. And then, of course, during the week, it's the Atlantic Book Awards. So the PEI had their book awards on Tuesday, the 30th. The 31st, they had an online event, so people can participate everywhere. And it was for the celebrating publishers. And then June 1st, they did Writing the Truth at Dart Gallery here in Dartmouth. And then they did the New Brunswick Book Awards was on Saturday, at the Press Club in Moncton. And then last night, of course, was the Nova Scotia Book Awards and Dartmouth Book Awards. And I mean, Dartmouth did pretty good. That golf course is the atmosphere last night was just so upbeat. A standing ovation. It was thrilling to be there. And then of course they have something going on in Lunenburg tonight with the fictional writers, Fete. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but anyway, Fete. Yeah. Anyway, and then of course the conclusion tomorrow night with the Atlantic Book Awards over at Central Library.
It's just amazing, and I think the standing ovation was for Jen Powley's partner who presented. It was just very, very moving, very moving. So, yeah, I mean, that's a lot that's going on. I think that, they really should.
Some stuff, but that was just the quick summary, because I know we're on a time crunch, so I wanted to make sure we had enough time for John to talk about all his books.
Lots of books. And I also wanted to also mention that the Atlantic Book Awards Society that sort of coordinates all this, they're a registered nonprofit with the mandate to promote and acknowledge excellence in Atlantic Canadian writing and book publishing through an annual awards ceremony and related events. So they work really hard to make sure that, all of the Atlantic provinces, have the awards programs. We're focusing a little bit more on the Nova Scotia. And of course, tomorrow night, we'll broaden it from the Atlantic Book Awards perspective. So, John, what's going on with the best published books? I did the Zoom last Friday night, where the nominees for the Best Published Book Awards spoke, and I was blown away. I enjoyed it thoroughly. Talk a little bit about those nominees, John. And
sure. Yeah, there are 4 terrific books up for that award. So Impressions of Newfoundland by Ting Ting Chen was one of the books that was first on my radar when I started at Atlantic Books today a year and a half ago. It was delayed once, and then it finally came out in the fall. And it's an amazing book. She is from China originally. she came to Newfoundland to visit or to study at first, and met this man called Robert Tilley, who became her muse. She tells the story in the book of how she was looking through her, not surprisingly, Newfoundland rain-splattered window in her car, and all the little raindrops, she realized after she took a picture of Robert through, and after she realized his face was in every single raindrop upside down. And that sort of launched their partnership. So this book is a really fascinating fusion of her photos look more like paintings that have had a photo taken of them. And I've spoken to people in Newfoundland who have looked at them and then suddenly realized, oh, I know where that is. But unless you see it with her eyes, you haven't seen it. So Impressions of Newfoundland. Then Mary Pratt, A Love Affair with Vision by Anne Koval. That was one after my heart as a biographer myself. Superb job. Like with Mary Pratt, you probably, often she's referred to as the wife of this person or the mother of this person, but this is Mary Pratt front and center. And Anne Koval had great access to the research. So you'll have this little snippet of her life. So in the text, you'll read that there was a day where Mary Pratt was entertaining her in-laws. There was a huge mess on the table. She was trying to clean it up. And then she was just struck by the way the light hit the ketchup bottle. And so that became a painting. And then you can see the painting beside it. And as a working parent myself, I just loved that book. No Ordinary Magic, The Art of Laurie Swim by Carol Bruneau. Carol Bruneau is back out now with a new book called Thresholds, a great collection of short stories, really fun, interesting, some pandemic-y, some more thoughtful, beyond that. But her book is about Laurie Swim, who does fabric art, quilting, basically. A lot of her quilting is about fishing accidents or community disasters. And it's a book that really lets you understand why this is an art form that you should be just as interested in as anything else. And then Recipe for a Good Life by Leslie Crew. Leslie Crew, if you know the name, you know the books, you're going to love her. You're going to have a fun time. The 1950s, we're smoking a lot of cigarettes, drinking a lot of alcohol. There's a hotshot writer in Montreal who runs out of gas. She just can't come up with her next murder mystery. So publishers take note. What do her publishers do? What any publisher would do. They send her on an all expenses paid retreat to Cape Breton, to an abandoned house in Cape Breton, as it turns out. But her there in that community, it's just terrific fun. So yeah, those are the 4 books up for the APMA Best Published.
Oh my goodness. And pick me, send me to an abandoned house in the middle. Oh, in Cape Breton. Oh my goodness. Talk about inspiration, hey?
Yeah.
Are you working on a book, John, or are you too busy editing magazines?
I am. No, I'm very deep into people. Some people may remember Charles Saunders. He was most known here as a journalist in the 1990s, as a Black journalist in Halifax. He died at the start of the pandemic, ended up buried in an unmarked grave, kind of lost. I got involved. Somebody emailed me kind of randomly and said, do you know what's going on with Charles? So I found his grave. Eventually, we were able to get a tombstone on it, and we were able to hold a service.
Wow.
And it turns out that along with being a journalist, he was one of the most important fantasy writers in 20th century America. And if you look here, that's actually me and Charles in the Washington Post a couple of months ago. They did a whole, mostly about Charles. I only get a cameo. But he wrote these books about Amaro, which is like Conan the Barbarian, but set in another Africa. Fantasy books, absolute gems. Like the quality of his writing. This is my new favorite book.
Okay, well,
now, but
I'll have to pick that one up. I used to read a lot of fantasy, science fiction fantasy, but I've kind of gotten away from that. And you were also an award nominee. When was that for Peace by Chocolate?
I have lost many awards. Well, let's talk about
somebody actually mentioned it last night. Peace by Chocolate was one of their favorite books, and I thought, well, there's a good reason for that. Yeah. Okay, so let's just have a quick scan down the nominees for tomorrow night, so we don't miss anybody. Hang on a sec.
I've got a couple I can here if you want me to. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, why don't you do that? Yeah.
So just looking at this list here, one of the Anne Connor Brymer, Vicki Grant's book, A Green Velvet Secret. I really love that one. I've been reading at Atlantic Books today. I read whatever comes on my desk. So that means a lot of YA. I hadn't read a lot of YA before because I'm an OA, I guess. But I've really come to love YA's ability to just say what you're feeling and then offer helpful ways out of it. So A Green Velvet Secret is about a girl and her grandmother, and there's, she's worried her grandmother is, I think her grandmother actually passes on towards the start of it, or she's not in good health. But it's just a great, I really enjoyed that, a really good story. And the honor song, of course, Bouton d'Or Cadi, bringing out the French and Mi'kmaq translation. So you have this beautiful song by George Paul in 3 languages. And the way it's laid out in the book, it's a kid's book, but it's an art book that anybody would be glad to have on their shelf. And you can see the Mi'kmaq, you can see the French, you can see the English, and you can start to piece together the languages.
Is George Paul related to Dan Paul in any way?
Not closely, as far as I know, no.
Who you also wrote about at
yes.
one point.
And I can grab one off the Thomas Riddell. I don't want to over-talk.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Yeah, one I really liked. One of my favorite books last year really was Violet Brown's This Is the House That Luke Built. This was one of those first books, but a first book that you spend most of your life writing. I feel that was the case for Violet Brown. And it was a really interesting book and a great candidate for an award like that, because often with adult fiction, sometimes the writers will try to change the chronology or write it in a sort of strange way, and it can kind of distract from it. And in this one, she actually did it perfectly, because the story is about a woman whose husband was building a house for the family, and midway through it, he's lost in a Newfoundland fishing accident. And so this half-built house kind of comes to represent him, and as they finish it, and as they, sometimes when they enter it, they end up talking to him, sort of the ghost of him. Other times they, it's kind of a very powerful, and this was an experience that had actually happened to Violet Brown. She lost her husband in a fishing accident in the 90s. So this novel was, it really hits hard. It was a great read.
Wow. Okay, shall I scroll? Are there, let's see. Oh no, so, okay, I've got all of them on the screen here. Do you have any favorites in that list, Sue?
No, I don't.
They're all your favorite.
Actually, most of them are in my to-be-read pile.
In the to-be-read, right. Well, and a lot of those to-be-reads wind up as reviews, because you're also a reviewer for the Mirimachi Reader. So but with the few minutes we have left, and Jon, you touched on, why awards programs are so important, and reviews are equally, if not even more important. And both of you spend an awful lot of time reading and reviewing books. You get feedback from readers, but what kind of feedback do you get from authors on the importance of that?
Do you want to go ahead?
No, you can go ahead.
You go ahead, Sue.
Well, the ones that I've been doing, I get a lot of positive feedback. They are very grateful. They're like, they say they're like love letters to the author. It's a reward for all their hard work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And how do you choose the books that you review?
Usually the authors are putting them in my hands.
That does go a long way, right?
Yeah.
And Sue's always feeding me ideas for authors to interview, so I appreciate you on that front as well. Jon, how about you? How do you choose books, and why is it important?
Yeah, so I'm in a bit of a different situation. So at Atlantic Books Today, a big part of my job is just to read books, and people send them in all the time. And for me, it's more, there's about 300 books published in Atlantic Canada every year. People are often surprised by that. There's about 40 publishers active in Atlantic Canada, including OC Publishing. And so for me, we can cover about 100 a year in the magazine and online. So it's a question of narrowing it down. And one of the books that I really enjoyed and kind of was interesting in how you review things is, so when I started this job for the first edition, which is what most of these awards were, we had Sherry Aikenhead's book, Mummy Don't. And we also had a book by John Eliot called A Mother's Betrayal. And those were both about the terrible case in Nova Scotia 15 years ago where a mother killed her own child. And, it was an unsolved mystery for a long time. So in that case, since we had two, I wanted to do something on both of them. And Sherry's book, which is nominated for the award, she's a journalist or a former journalist, and she really brings that 360-degree perspective where she just sees it from all angles. You hear all the different voices, really comprehensive. John Eliot's book, A Mother's Betrayal, he was a police officer who actually worked on the case, on the Mr. Big sting that led to the convictions. And so to read those two books together, I thought, and to review them together, we had one person review those two plus another true crime book from New Brunswick. it really kind of illustrated the strengths of different books, and it helps the reader figure out. So maybe you want to read about this, but which way do you want to read about it? Do you want to read the kind of firsthand, impassioned account of the police officer who was there, or do you want a journalist who's gone and done the full work of telling the story, and you can figure it out?
Oh, both.
Yeah, exactly. That's the other option.
Right.
Read them both.
Oh my goodness, yeah, absolutely. Because I think it's just, to see it from both those perspectives, and you're going to get a lot of different emotion depending on the point of view, right? Like in any book. I just want to give a shout out also to all the folks who are watching. Guys, you got lots of hellos to both you, Sue and John. Read by the Sea says, very impressive, and yes, thank you for the warning. Hello, John and Sue. Lana Shoup is watching. Hi, Lana. Heidi Rushton, love the berry pickers and Hold My Girl. Hard to choose between them for the Riddell. Yeah, that'll be a good one, right? Oh yeah.
There's an event at Dartmouth.
Oh yes, yes. I wonder why you're holding that one up.
For next year's awards, this is Heidi. Hello, this is Heidi's Pet Tales Brilliant Middle Grade Reader. This will be winning next year, and we'll talk about it then.
Well, and we have to get Heidi onto the author journey. So, any insights into how to get her on the show?
For Read by the Sea, I'm reading this now. Carl Subban is going to be there, and I get to interview him. He's the father of PK Subban and 4 other children, and I'm loving this book. So I'm excited to meet him and get to Read by the Sea this summer.
Well, and that's just another thing about all the wonderful events that are happening in the Atlantic provinces. And Read by the Sea is a favorite. It's the first weekend in July. And Heidi says, thanks for the plug, LOL. And Lana loved Pet Tales. Yay, yay. There's so much talent in this region, and it always gives me such great pleasure to talk about books and to give a little bit more exposure to authors, new authors, veteran authors, from whatever in any genre. So I thank you guys for joining me today, and we covered a lot of ground, but there's probably a lot more to cover. But I guess hopefully I'll see you at the Atlantic Book Awards tomorrow night. And I hope I gave a shout out to everybody who's watching. Any last thoughts before we wrap up for today, John?
Yeah, I'll plug one more book, one of my other favorites from last year, Roar by Shelley Thompson. This was a great book to read and a great person to kind of overlap with. Thank you. I don't have my copy to hand. So I just picked up the book, read it. That's what I do. I didn't know anything about it, but this is a book about a young woman coming home. Her mother has died. They're coming home for the funeral. It's the first time the family has been together in a long time, and the mother was the one that made everybody nice to each other. And she's gone, so they don't know how they're going to handle it. And the young woman coming home, Dawn, was last there as Donnie. She was raised as a boy, and this is the first time she's come home as herself. And what I loved about Shelley's book is that she switches perspectives in the chapters. So you get a perspective on Dawn, on her sister's fiance, so even some of the kind of ignorant thugs in town who give Dawn problems. You understand a bit more. So the whole book kind of broadens your understanding. And so Roar by Shelley Thompson. And after I finished reading it, I was listening to the BBC late at night, and they had a drama on, and it was Shelley Thompson back in her acting.
Yes.
Everywhere.
Oh my gosh. And she is like she's a quadruple threat. We're supposed to have her on last week, and she had some technical difficulties. So hopefully we'll have her at some point. But screenwriter, author, producer, director, like her roles are just, myriad. And I'm glad that you tossed that in, because this is one of my favorite books of the year. I think it's such an amazing presentation of the challenges and the trauma that the trans and queer community experience, and just ways to address it and to sit with it. However you're finding yourself, in a situation on both sides of the fence. So I think it's raw, it's real, it's quite moving. So I appreciate you bringing that up. Thanks. One of my favorite books of the year. And Sue, any last thoughts?
No, I'm just wishing everybody good luck for tomorrow.
Yes.
I have my favorites in my head, and maybe I'll go.
Now that we've chatted about them all, now we're all excited. I know the TBR pile just gets bigger and bigger, doesn't it? So again, thank you guys for joining me today, and congratulations to all the nominees and the winners from last night, and good luck to everybody tomorrow night. And I'm sure that we'll be talking about the winners from tomorrow night as well. So again, thank you guys so much, John and Sue, for joining me.
Good to see you, Sue.
Yes, thanks.
And thank you all for joining me on the author journey this week. And happy award season, and happy reading and happy writing. And we'll see you again next time on the author journey. Bye for now.